A large severe weather event will be coming to the United States today, and this is actually going to bring quite significant severe weather to many, anywhere from the northern plains and into Canada, all the way back through Texas and even into Mexico, where we will have 4 different areas essentially of severe weather that we're watching for today, with significant damaging winds, large to very large hail, and even a few tornadoes being possible. And then we're going to have another severe weather event as we go into Monday and Tuesday of this week, where more significant severe weather will be a possibility. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down everything that you need to know about today's severe weather event, and eventually as we go into both Monday and Tuesday, and why I do think Tuesday could be another significant round for severe weather. But we're going to begin first with what's happening today in terms of severe weather on this fantastic Sunday. We do currently have a slight and marginal threat of severe weather that literally stretches almost across the entire Great Plains, with a small little extension as well back over in East Texas and as well as southern Louisiana. Notice that 3 out of 5 severe weather risk, though, back over in Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado. This is where the greatest concern for severe weather is going to be today, with the potential for significant damaging winds, large to very large hail, and the most elevated tornado risk will be in this area. But don't get too mixed up in this area, because we have a threat for all modes of severe weather anywhere in the slight, marginal, or enhanced risk for severe weather. Notice the damaging wind threat for today is going to be elevated across Nebraska and Kansas, where we could have some damaging winds as high as 80 to even 85 miles per hour at times. I am planning on going back to the weather studio today to be able to go live for this, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Overall, the threat for damaging winds, though, will exist anywhere from the North Dakota and Minnesota back into Texas and even Louisiana. Notice the large hail threat is most elevated right where those initial discrete supercells will fire up. That is anywhere from Nebraska all the way back into West Texas, where we could see some hailstones as high as the size of apples, and maybe even an isolated scenario where we see some softball sized hail. That would be primarily, though, back down in West Texas, which again is very typical for this time of the year. So definitely be staying weather aware if you're anywhere near Midland or even Lubbock, Texas, all the way back into parts of western Nebraska. The tornado risk for today is a very elongated area. It is a very long, narrow corridor from West Texas all the way back into Minnesota and North Dakota, which I do think overall today will definitely be a little bit more active than what we've dealt with the last couple of days when it comes to the tornado threat. We really haven't had many tornado warnings both yesterday and even on Friday. I do think today, though, we're gonna have a bit more of that tornadic activity, since we're all 4 different areas of storms that I am kind of watching for here. One back over in southwest Texas, one in the panhandle of Texas, another one back over here in Nebraska and Kansas, and another area back over in the northern plains. There are essentially going to be 4 different mesoscale convective systems that I think will happen today, or at least 4 clusters of storms that'll develop. Overall, though, the greatest tornado threat will be back over in parts of northwest Kansas, southwest Nebraska, and northeast Colorado. But if you're anywhere in the green or brown shaded areas, you should have a tornado action plan in place just in case there is a tornado warning in your location today. You might be wondering, why are we seeing severe weather all the way back up in even the northern plains today? Well, one of the reasons why is because the moisture is about to surge substantially up to the north, which will create a lot of buoyancy across a large chunk of the Great Plains today. The good news is that we really do not have an organized trough here that's going to be able to produce the threat for like a significant severe weather outbreak or even a tornado outbreak today, which is good news. But we will have a lot of buoyancy, which is going to lead to some thunderstorm activity with dew points well into the low to mid 60s, anywhere from North Dakota all the way back into Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Some areas even in Texas into the low 70s for dew points today. Once we go into Monday into Tuesday, that moisture will continue to stay well up into the northern plains and the Midwest, which will eventually allow for Tuesday to see some sort of more significant severe weather event, I think, as we go into Tuesday and maybe even into Wednesday across parts of the Ohio Valley. So a couple of things to watch for long term, but we're going to talk more about the long term here in just a few minutes with Tuesday and even beyond that. Here's what we're looking at in terms of instability today, which is again like putting gasoline into a vehicle. It's what fuels severe storms. Today we're going to have plenty of that all the way back even into the northern plains, so we should easily get a couple of corridors where the greatest concern for severe weather will be. I think really overall it's West Texas, Nebraska, and Kansas, and then back over into North, South Dakota, and even Minnesota, where the greatest concern for severe weather will be. And again, plenty of instability even throughout much of the rest of the work week as well. All right, we're going to go south to north, give you an idea of the showers and thunderstorms in terms of the timing, beginning with Texas and Oklahoma today, which there might even be some thunderstorms out there as early as this morning with some hail and wind, but overall the severe weather threat should remain on the lower side of things. By this afternoon, discrete cells will begin to fire up over in the hill country, Again, that's pretty typical. Overall, we'll start to see more storm activity moving out from west to east over in the Texas Panhandle and back near Lubbock and Amarillo around about 5-6 o'clock this evening. Storms really start to fire up though and become a bit more clustered as we get past sunset, and this should eventually allow for more of a damaging wind threat to approach areas like North Texas overnight into Monday morning, and that could even lead to some damaging winds going all the way back down into areas like Southeast Texas and Louisiana as we go into Monday afternoon, and eventually by the evening I think things will dry out just a little bit overall. Now back over in Nebraska and as well as Kansas, we're going to get a little narrow corridor for a greater tornado potential, especially back over in southwestern Nebraska and northwestern Kansas. Overall, it's going to be a short window, probably going to be from about 4 or 5 o'clock up to about 7 or 8. It's not a super big window, and then after that, things will be mostly wind related, but that will be the window to watch for a tornado risk for today, at least in Nebraska and northwest Kansas. Here's what we're looking at in terms of timing for today. Some showers and thunderstorms will be out there this morning. Overall, this will stabilize the atmosphere until the afternoon, and eventually as we get closer to about 4 or 5 o'clock, storms begin to form and they will be clustered. Anything that can stay discreet though will have a greater potential for producing a tornado. Once we get closer to 5, 6, 7 o'clock, those storms are rumbling right across the interstate, approaching Kearney, Nebraska by about 8 o'clock or so. Storms are also moving across central Kansas, where damaging winds will be possible. The greatest concern for wind though will be out of this cluster here that forms over in Nebraska. And once we go throughout the rest of the evening, these storms will continue to push east towards Kansas City, where again the main concern will be damaging winds, maybe a brief tornado, but I'm really not expecting much of a tornado risk after this becomes more linear past about 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. Eventually as we go into the overnight hours, that line weakens out, and then more sporadic storm activity will be possible Monday morning in Kansas, Oklahoma, and even parts of Texas and as well as Arkansas. And then going into the afternoon, things look relatively dry for the most part in Kansas, maybe a couple of pop-up thunderstorms in Missouri, but again nothing too crazy overall there. There's a large marginal threat for severe weather on Monday, which we'll get to in a second, but overall I don't expect anything too substantial or very organized. Here's what we're looking at in the northern plains for today. We'll have plenty of thunderstorms out there this morning. Once we go later into the afternoon, we'll start to watch for a few discrete cells that might produce an isolated tornado threat, but more of a linear threat for storms will exist as we get closer to 3, 4 o'clock. This becomes a lot more linear though once we get closer to 5 to 6. This will all be producing mostly a wind threat, and eventually by 7, 8, 9 o'clock those storms continue to push east, eventually going into areas like Wisconsin and eventually through southern Minnesota, and eventually as we go into Monday morning, things are not really severe by that point. And then once we go into tomorrow, I kind of already alluded to this, but just a large marginal threat for severe weather from the Midwest back into the southern plains. If we get some sort of upgrade to a slight risk, we might consider a live stream, but I think it's going to be a low chance overall. There are a couple of areas to watch for an isolated brief or weak tornado, one of which back over in western Oklahoma and north central Texas, and then the other one back over in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. So if anything really crazy happens there, we'll go live, but again, overall, I'm not expecting too much when it comes to severe weather. Now, overall, as we go throughout the rest of this week, things are going to change a lot. We've had a very zonal jet stream for a while, which means very limited curvature in the jet stream, usually keeping our weather patterns a little bit more settled, and we are usually not talking about massive severe weather events. But unfortunately, as we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, we are going to get a negatively tilted trough in the northern plains with a very strong jet streak, by the way, coming right out of the Pacific Ocean. Once we go into Wednesday, this will become more organized, producing the threat for severe weather both Tuesday and eventually going into Wednesday across parts of the Midwest for Tuesday, and then eventually going through the Ohio Valley on Wednesday. Some of the central plains could also get in on the action. Notice this though, we have a low pressure system up here. We have a very strong jet stream back over in the northern plains, large high pressure system in the southwest, and another low back over in the Pacific Ocean. What this is going to set up for is a very hot stretch of weather in the southwest and even parts of the southern plains. In addition to that, this jet stream here is going to allow for large scale convective systems to essentially impact a large chunk of the northern plains, Midwest, and Ohio Valley with any sort of moisture. And this is a prime setup for mesoscale convective systems, and in some cases derechos as well. So that's what really the biggest concern will be for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Though we could see tornadoes, I think the greatest concern honestly will be wind. Once we go into Friday, Saturday, into Sunday, notice that low pressure system really slows down and is just cranking in the northeast. What this will allow for is possibly a low pressure system back over in the southwest to eventually allow for a more active weather pattern in the southern plains. And once we go into next week, so as we go into the second week of June, I do think overall the weather might still stay active in a few areas like the southern plains and maybe into the Ohio Valley or East Coast, but I honestly don't think we're going to be dealing with too much crazy weather for the second week of June. At least long term, the European model does show as we go into Tuesday. Notice that cluster of storms that develops back over in the upper Midwest, eventually moving through the Central Plains and also the Midwest. Once we go into Wednesday, more storm activity in the Ohio Valley, relatively disorganized. We might see some severe weather, but doesn't look like a major chance. Look at Thursday and Friday. We are looking at a very dry and settled weather pattern for a vast majority of the United States. And I'm going on vacation, by the way, starting Saturday. This is pre-planned. I'm not planning on going live at all for the anywhere from June 8th to about June 14th, just for reference. But overall, I don't think we're actually going to have much of anything that's crazy as we go into the second week of June, knock on wood. I think the one area, though, we'll have to watch for is the Southern Plains and the Gulf Coast region as we go into the second week of June. At least long-term computer models indicating a much more active weather pattern down there. But as long as we have this large-scale trough up here, that should really keep things at least a bit more settled for a little bit longer of a period of time. So maybe 5 to 7 days of some slightly quieter weather at least. But the Southern Plains, I do think, will still stay active, with some periodic severe weather still being a possibility as they continue their record-breaking season of rainfall in areas like Texas. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.